Hello and welcome everyone to the webinar called Deforestation Talks. What does EUDR mean for coffee and cocoa? My name is Angelica. I am a sustainability manager at N.Progression and I will be your host for today. Let's just wait a couple more minutes for everyone to join us here. We just don't want anyone to miss out any part of what we're about to present today, right? So, by the way, it's so wonderful to be having all of you here, both our fantastic speakers and the fantastic audience. And while we're waiting for the others to join, I would like to welcome you to write in the chat where all of you are from. I know that we have people from the UK, from Germany, but I'm also curious as to where the rest of you are joining in from. So please let us know. It would be lovely to know that. Oh, Vietnam! Wow. Currently in Japan, that's amazing. Japan is lovely. What about the rest of you? Okay, UK, London, UK, nice. Germany, perfect. Yorkshire, UK. Greece, wow, fantastic. UK, Wales, wow. France, bonjour. Amsterdam, great. All right, so let me remind you of some housekeeping rules very briefly. We'll have your microphone muted and your camera off during the presentation. So, we don't want to distract the speakers. And you can use the chat box to send your questions and comments at any time. We truly encourage to do that. And if the question fits the message that the speaker is conveying, I'll be posing it right the moment it's posted. So know that you just don't have to wait until like the Q&A session or anything like that. We will also address the rest of the questions during the Q&A session. And also during the Q&A, you can raise a hand and we'll turn on your mic and camera so you can ask your questions to the speakers and or, the audience directly. We'll also be recording this webinar and we'll send you a link to access it later. And you'll also receive all the resources to your email, such as, this presentation. And I have to mention a very important part that this is the first one of the Deforestation Talks webinar series on EUDR. And we are planning another one for the beginning of December, as this is when we'll be having a ton of new and valuable insight on EUDR updates to share with all of you. And the initial testing starts in November. And so that's when we'll get some news updates, results, that we can share with all of you in December during our next webinar. So please stay tuned to that. And I guess let's just allow like a minute, for others to join in. And we'll move on to the presentation itself. While we're at it, my dear speakers, how are you today?
Great.
Very well, thank you.
Very fine. It's fantastic to see such a diverse audience in the room.
Exactly, right? It's wonderful. All right, I guess we can begin. So once again, we're delighted to have all of you here, and we hope that you'll find this session very useful, very engaging, and very fun. And so to the reason why we decided to do this webinar, it's come to light that EUDR is being viewed from just like one of the perspectives usually, be it the IT perspective, the farmer's perspective, the business management perspective, and so on and so forth. And our goal here is to combine these perspectives into one consolidated format. And while we're still waiting for a few more attendees to join, please bear with us for a couple of moments. And in the meantime, let me introduce our speakers for today. We have Arif Gajiev, a traceability expert at N.Progression. Hi, Arif. How are you today?
Hi, everyone. I'm fine. I'm wondering how many countries we have today in our discussion, so that's great.
It's wonderful, right? We also have Alex Anayev, a sustainability strategy and reporting expert. Hi there.
Hi there. Good to see you all.
Likewise. We have Paul Rook, who is an executive director at British Coffee Association.
Hello, good morning. Good morning to everybody.
Next, we have Malcolm Hack, the Group Sustainability Manager at UCC Coffee.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here.
We'll also have Jennifer Mercott, who is the consultant on sustainability in the coffee sector in London, UK.
Hi, everybody.
Hi there. We're truly very fortunate to have such a qualified panel of speakers with us today, and we look forward to hearing from them. Now let me briefly go over the agenda. First, the introduction. I know you're all very eager to learn more about the new EU regulation, so I will keep this very brief. In fact, the introduction is so short, you might miss it if you blink, but please don't blink. The webinar will provide you with an overview of the legislation, if the key provisions and what's behind the scenes. We'll also discuss how to set up a due diligence system and hear from the industry representatives on their challenges and opportunities. You'll also have a chance to ask your questions and share your views during the Q&A session. And then we'll finally have the discussion wrap up. And once again, before we start, we would like to get to know you better. Please participate in our poll, and Arif, please help me with that. Please select one of the options that best describes you and just click submit. I'll just wait a couple of moments for all of you guys to submit your answers. Just a couple of more moments. So most of you guys are other. It's very interesting. And non-SME operator, distributor or wholesaler. And then following the coffee and cocoa associations. That's fantastic. Thank you all of you guys for participation. We'll have some more polls throughout the presentation, so stay tuned for that. And now, moving on, let's discuss what EUDR is as an overview to keep everyone on the same page about this new and, well, perhaps somewhat confusing regulation. And without further ado, let me hand it over to Alex. Alex, over to you.
Hi all again, I'm Alex. I'm a sustainability consultant and currently I work for a major energy company, but I'm also advising the N.Progression team on sustainability matters. And today I presume the term EUDR already resonates with many of you, possibly stirring a mix of emotions from excitement to healthy concern, and I hope not anxiety yet. And just to kick off our webinar, I would like to provide a brief overview of the legislation, just to have a common understanding, what we are talking about. And later on, my colleagues will elaborate on what different elements mean to you and look at the compliance from different perspectives. And just as a reminder, this session is for your information only, so it's not meant to substitute your legal counsel. Next slide, please. So at the core of the EUDR is can you go to next slide, please? Is prohibition. So basically, we are talking about a ban on import or export of certain agricultural products linked to deforestation. In our case, coffee and cocoa and their derivatives. And an important point to make is that there is a difference between what's legal in the production country and what is compliant with the EUDR. So while in certain countries, practices that involve land use where there used to be a forest before 2020 could be legal, for EUDR compliance purposes, it is not legal to import such produce into the EU. So And if you're an operator or trader, you're required to trace your commodities right back into the plot of origin. And when it comes to imports and exports, a due diligence statement must be filed to the centralized EU IT system. And it also serves as a critical document for customs clearance. So non-compliant shipments, even if they have one coffee bean or one cocoa bean in it, then you cannot bring that product into the EU. And also, it is important that mixing of products is not allowed. So compliant products for the EU need to be kept separate. And also, if there is a slip up, like a portion of shipment where that doesn't comply, it needs to be identified and separated before it hits the EU market. Otherwise, as I said, you face a ban on your activity. And in terms of timing, so as you know, for larger entities, there is an 18-month transition period, and the compliance needs to start end of next year. So effectively, we have 14 months to prepare. I know it's not a lot, and I hope that we provide you some clarity today so that you can get prepared in time. Next slide, please. Oh, can you go one previous slide? Up. Yeah, this one. So I think you're already aware that it's not only about raw materials, but also derivatives like cocoa butter, fat, oil. And just to confirm who this regulation applies to. So an operator is a legal entity, or could be even a person who brings products to the EU. But equally, it applies to exporters from the EU. And traders are those that trade products and make relevant products available on the market. So, and can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, I would like to talk a little bit about obligations of traders and operators, and give you a very simplified example so that you get the concept. So the fundamental requirement is that you should map your supply chain and trace and have geodata for all the farms associated with your shipment, and you need to get that data before your product arrives to the EU and before you clear your customs. So an operator who is responsible for bringing the product to the EU has to conduct due diligence on the supply chain and submit a due diligence statement. And just as a reminder, this due diligence is quite comprehensive. So it's not only about understanding whether your supply chain has a deforestation risk, but you need to look at a variety of factors like presence of indigenous people in the area, or previous experience or previous exposure to corruption, for example, associated with a particular supplier. So you need to store all the data on your compliance, and Arif will talk about it later, and then conduct risk assessment and submit a due diligence statement to the EU IT system. So as the product is already imported and it moves along the value chain, for example, a coffee roaster buys deforestation-free beans, roasts them, and grinds them. They are still considered as an operator, and they can use the reference number from the statement that has already been issued, but they also need to check that the due diligence that was conducted previously was done accurately and correctly. And as the roasted and ground coffee moves on to the retail sector, a trader, for example, a retailer or a coffee chain needs to check again that the due diligence was conducted properly and use the reference number from the originally issued due diligence statement. Next slide, please. And just a little bit on liability and impacts for the business. So ultimately, it's the trader or operator who are responsible and bear the load for compliance with the regulation. But the EU in the FAQ and in our additional requests make it clear that as an operator, you need to communicate your expectations and requirements upwards and downwards the supply chain. And ultimately, if there is a case of non-compliance, each actor of the supply chain concerned is held liable. But still, it's the operator or trader who are not compliant face penalties. And it's quite a hefty penalty that could be up to 4% of your company's annual turnover. So it's quite a big stick in the regulation. Unfortunately, there are not so many carrots that would encourage doing things properly. So it's kind of punitive regulation. And also, national competent authorities, and in each EU member state, these could be different authorities. They will be responsible for checking operators and traders depending on their exposure to risk. And the verification will be, they will need to check at least 9%, 3%, or 1% of subjects, depending on their exposure and level of risk. Also, there is a concern that this regulation could cause leakage. For example, trade flows could be reoriented towards other markets and other countries, and the EU have demonstrated their commitment to work with producer countries using different platforms like Cocoa Dialogue or forest partnerships, and also intensify their engagement with major consumer countries like US and China, so that similar rules are applied universally across the globe. And it's not only the EU that is pushing for regulation, but I recognize that it's quite a complex issue and a massive task to do, and we'll hear some perspectives from producer countries and from Jennifer, who's done some research on Uganda. So this is just a quick overview from me, just to get everybody to the same page, and I would like to pass over to Arif, who will talk about what it means in practice and what elements you need to have in your due diligence system and how IT can support you in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alex. I think that I should present myself a bit because I'm a traceability expert, and I advise companies like large companies, FMCG companies, and other companies on their projects for the implementation of serialization traceability systems. And I have been working on traceability and reporting automation projects for a very long time. And EUDR is not the first legislation where submitting the reports to the authorities is required. All these projects were more complex from IT points of view than it had been expected. And one good practice works very well to succeed with such kind of projects. The legislation should be carefully read and analyzed by IT. I'm an IT guy, but what I'm talking about IT is very important. So it's not because I'm an IT guy, but because of the IT part is really important here. And I will try to explain how the legislation is linked to the IT requirements. You see the first slide. Like Alex, I delved into the study, and the first thing I saw was a statement in the EUDR legislation preamble, at 49, as I remember. Operators should establish and implement due diligence systems. Those due diligence systems should include 3 elements, namely information requirements, risk assessment, and risk mitigation measures, complemented by reporting obligations. So this is the text of the law. So let's go step by step here. All information requirements in EUDR are about the data that links source locations of the commodities and helps to trace the product deforestation-free status up to European Union market. It's very similar to classic track and trace requirements that we see in other industries. So here I called on this slide, I called it keeping traceability. Let's talk about it first. Traceability means that we have the object of traceability and the subject of traceability. And it is important to answer the question, what is the object? So what we're talking about, is it a batch or is it a delivery or is it the same coffee beans from the same place? And the same question is about the subject. So who is it? The operator, the international trader, the farmer, or maybe the commodities exchange platform? So let's think about it and let's read the law. In fact, everything can be found in the law. Firstly, traceability in EUDR is about dealing with information which is related to each product that has been placed in the European Union market. Then we see what does it mean to place on the market. To place on the market means, according to the EUDR general provisions, means relevant products from third countries placed under the customs procedure, released for free circulation. So I make the conclusion that the object is each delivery inside European Union. And also there is an export obligations, but here I think I will focus on importing obligations. So the operator or the importer should prove deforestation-free evidence for each delivery. And the following downstream partners may rely on their due diligence statements. But this is another story. But the operator, which is the first introducing the product to the European Union market, according to law and according to regulator comments that we got, is ultimately responsible for providing evidence that there was no risk of mixing or consisting product from deforested plants. And this operator submits it in the operator's declaration in due diligence statement. So the subject is the operator who brings this coffee to the European Union. And key statement here, again, I would like to focus the attention, is ultimately responsible. So if the supplier did a mistake, for example, or by mistake we have the beans from the unknown source and DNA test that authorities may undertake confirms it, the operator will have problem. Non-conformance case will be published on the authority's website. Also, it is written in the law that this information should be public. The company will be fined, so the reputation loss will be on the operator side, not on the supplier side. In this case, our next slide and the next topic, managing risks, is becoming no less important. So when I was reading the law, the process, how the companies manage their risks, should make even more interest to the authorities than due diligence statement, reporting, and other stuff. What is important here is what I've just told on the previous slide, is that the operators are accountable for each non-European Union supplier who is directly participate in the supply process. So the risk of assessment, the risk assessment is not a formality. It's not just enough to receive the verification from a third-party vendor or from the commodities exchange platform and just report the due diligence statement. Operators should undertake all risk assessment and risk mitigation procedures according to 14 criteria that described in Article 10. These criteria include also supply complexity analysis. They include stage of the beans processing. They include risk of mixing in any part of the supply chain. So from the IT point of view, I see a lot of data that will be involved from different sources, and not only geolocations are the subject for risk assessment, but also warehouses, aggregation stations, washing stations, transportation, international trader, whatever the company have in the supply chain outside of the European Union. And the operator is responsible for that. Also, the operator should keep 5 years records, make reassessment each year, and keep previous risk assessments too, because the older DDS statements, they are related to the previous risk assessments. The operator should appoint a compliance officer. I'm talking about here. I see a lot of questions regarding SME or non-SME operators. So I'm talking about non-SME operators, because small and medium enterprises, which are described in the law, you can see these parameters. They have much less complexity in the reporting, but this is another story. So the operator should appoint a compliance officer responsible for EUDR record and check due diligence system in yearly independent audits. So the managing the risks is crucial, and it requires managing a lot of data. It's about keeping records and metadata, and what is important to relate different databases in different systems to each other. So it's not an easy task to do, but wow, how it is similar to all compliance projects that I've met before. On the next slide, finally, reporting obligations. The easiest part, yes, until we meet devil in the details. Let's divide reporting requirements to what we have to do, what we have to report according to law, and what we have to do beyond the reporting according to, let's say, common sense. Reporting itself, it's quite straightforward procedure. You send the report to the information system, you receive the reference number back according to the law. So what is missing here? Yes, how we do it. And many consultants say that the problem is that there is no public API for testing. They will be available only in the second half of next year, but actually it's not a big deal. Yeah, testing is always, it's not a big deal. What is important is to design how the due diligence statements will be linked to the relevant risk assessment and risk mitigation information and other information requirements. Please take a look at the note at the right part of the slide. The due diligence statement includes only part of the information requirements, and the rest of the information requirements they have to be in the due diligence system. And as soon as you have authorities request, you have to provide the other information to the authorities. So the DDS statement doesn't have all the information that we have in information requirements. The other important question is how to validate the due diligence statement before submitting it to avoid errors of non-conformance, to avoid other errors, and so on. So also the same question is how to check the due diligence statements from the upstream partner. How to manage communications between the upstream and downstream partner, how to manage incidents, because when you will receive the request from the authorities, you should treat it as an incident, and it should be managed according to the incidents procedure. How to provide data by the authorities request, how to get all of this data. So I would recommend, first of all, to design and document these processes and answers for these questions as a part of your due diligence system documentation. It's very important, and as soon as you design these processes and answer all of these questions, the following procedures will be much easier for you to manage. And honestly, I think there should be a very good automation, at least in companies with the complex supply chains. Otherwise, operations will stuck with all these duties from the first incident or from the first authority request. Okay, let's warm up a bit. I have prepared another poll. For my future slides, I'm interested in your opinion. Let me just start this poll. Just 1 minute. Regarding the due diligence system, most probably what I have just said is not the news for many of you. Yes, I have launched the poll. Please provide your answers, colleagues. It's very important for my following slides. Perhaps you already know or think on how may a due diligence system look like in your company. Is it an IT system or is it a not IT system? What do you think your company may use about using the existing IT systems and tools to cover all these tasks? So what is your opinion? Please provide your answer. Yeah, actually, we asked the European Commission, and we received the answer on this question. So they do not require a specific type of the due diligence system. So you can build due diligence system in any way you would like. So they doesn't require automation, but I think automation is required by you. So thanks. All the answers are correct. All the answers are correct. Actually, I'm an IT guy, as I told, and I'm gonna share my vision on how the due diligence system may look like as an IT system. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, and one of the main idea of any IT automation is to minimize managing efforts and operational efforts. The gold principle is to make necessary but sufficient changes. It means that there is no need to implement a big IT monster system if you can reuse your current tools and sources of data. In this case, the due diligence system as an IT system has two components: the core functionality. It will manage the new processes like reporting, business validation, EUDR storage requirements. So the processes which you don't have now, but you will have after the EUDR compliance. And the next component is peripheral, so-called peripheral data sources that will provide the system with necessary data and may either be from the existing systems like ERP, SRM, etc., or maybe a part of the new system that you are building. If you don't have any source data, for example, you do not have the suppliers management system, or these data sources unavailable, you can build this database in your due diligence system. So this is the principle. Each component, the core functionality and peripheral data sources, may be realized in different ways. And on the next slide, you can see the ways of realization. The core functionality may be implemented as a new system, or your current systems may be adapted, or you may outsource it. There are different ways. The choice is dependent on your operations complexity, the level of automation, and many other things. The sources of data also may be in your existing system. So peripheral data sources may be in your existing system. If by case you do not have it in existing systems, as an example, for example, this supply management system, this functionality and databases may be rolled out together with the new functionality. This approach you will choose together with your IT vendors, and we recommend to ask your IT vendor who is providing you such kind of systems or information to help you with the designing of the system. And there are two examples of the architecture I would like to share with you. On the next slide, you can see one of the examples here, how we did this analysis. There is a new due diligence system. Angel, could you please move to the next slide? Yes. Here is a new due diligence system in white, which is with a white background, which is connected with the ERP systems and incident management tool like ServiceNow or Jira, Service Desk, or whatever, and gets the most of the information and raw data from there by the means of direct integration through the APIs. And on the next slide, there is other option, other example. The due diligence system has all sources in the and databases inside. A good IT product should be flexible, so you could choose any content of the system depending on how your IT landscape is currently built. if you're interested in more technical details, I can share our experience in building different types of traceability systems. So feel free to reach me out if you need any support here. Now my presentation is over, but I'm not saying goodbye. If you need any help or consultation,
thank you so much, Arif, for that informative and very practical information on how to set up a due diligence system from an IT perspective. I am very sure that the audience has gained a lot of valuable insights and tips from your experience and expertise. And now let's move on to the topic of our webinar, to the next topic of our webinar, which is the panel discussion. This is where we'll hear from different stakeholders and perspectives on the EUDR and its implications. And we'll start off with Malcolm, who is the Group Sustainability Manager at UCC Coffee, who will tell us more about due diligence systems implementations. Malcolm, please.
Thank you, Angelica. You can hear me all right? Good, thank you. So just to quickly introduce myself, yes, working at UCC Coffee Europe, which is a large top 10 global coffee roaster, focusing on both business to business and business to consumer coffee sales, both in European Union countries and in countries adjacent to the European Union, which has some relevance, I think, and I think Paul from British Coffee Association. It's interesting that we have people based in non-EU countries that are taking a lot of interest in this regulation as well, as there's clearly some spillover both in the supply chain and on the demand side as well. Why am I participating today? Well, firstly, I as Alex said in the introduction, a range of impacts are coming to us as a business, and this is an opportunity to get some insights from the other participants and from N.Progression as an expert in this area. How do we feel about it? I think when we see a lot of information, of course, anxiety is one of the emotions, but also reassurance by seeing how experts such as Arif are addressing the issue and breaking it down according to their expertise and being out there and having the possibility to offer solutions to our business. So it's quite a roller coaster from the emotional side of things. And specifically within our business, as a sustainability function, we're taking the lead within our business to coordinate efforts across all different areas. I think that is key for a company in the coffee business in Europe. This is not just the responsibility of one individual function, be it the roasting team or the coffee buying team. There's so many different areas of our business that are potentially impacted that we need to work together cross-functionally. So I think my expertise probably in some areas is limited, and luckily I have people I can connect with both internally and externally to assist on that. Talking about systems, so the perspective as a coffee roaster that we have on systems, you can see the picture of the iceberg on this page. There is a system being operated or will be operated and provided by EU called the Traces NT system that is effectively proposed to be a database of all of the geolocations where the products are coming from. And the perspective that we have on that system is that, as Arif said, it's only holding a small fraction of the data within the data requirements of the law, but it is the oil that keeps the industry moving forward. It's the thing that would be required for product to move through customs and avoid the non-compliance risk mentioned under the 72 hours heading there. So in effect, there will be thinking ahead when everything's working smoothly in the future, there will be a process that every business will be putting in place to take that geolocation information, to plug it into the EU's Traces NT system and to keep the trade going. And coffee trade in Europe. It's, I think, around a third of the world's coffee exports. There's an incentive for all parties in the coffee industry to keep that trade moving forwards, and the livelihoods of everyone in that coffee chain depend on that. So it is important that that system is understood. Things are becoming clearer as we move on. I think we will talk a little bit in a moment about the possibility to test into that system. But I think from my personal perspective, and speaking as someone who will be both an operator and a trader in the EU definition, I have more concern perhaps about the other system, which is the piece of the iceberg under the water, which is the other due diligence systems that will ultimately determine whether we comply with the legislation and the things that will be asked about to us should any of our products be audited. And the anticipation is there's a volume of transactions and due diligence statements that will be made linked with the risk status that will be applied to coffee growing countries, means that we will receive hundreds, if not thousands, of audits over time as a business. And that to deal with that level of audit and to share that level of information with potentially dozens of member states and their competent authorities means that we do need robust systems in place under the water surface to communicate what we've done in terms of risk assessment, how we've linked that to the geolocations in the piece above the water, and then how else we're addressing the other steps of due diligence as they're defined to ensure that the supply chain is deforestation free. So I think the analogy of the iceberg is there, as I said, to describe the system that we know about, which is the EU one, versus the systems that Arif has started to describe here that most companies will need to have in place. And connected to that, I think what we've got to think about in these systems as each company thinks about how to do it as appropriate for their own supply chains and complexity is maintaining a level of uniformity and coordination in the data that we're using. I mean, one thing that is anathema to all systems is when we have everybody is working on different formats of data in different protocols, and they become then impossible to collate together into, for example, an annual due diligence report or other such things that are required versus the law. So those are my headline perspectives, I think, on due diligence systems, looking at it from the perspective of an operator or trader already sort of 1 year out from the implementation. So of course, if there's any questions or challenges on that, I'm happy to receive those.
Thank you so much, Malcolm, for the detailed and clear presentation on the due diligence system implementation. I'm sure our audience has learned a lot from you and your insights. And now we can move on to our next topic, which is the EUDR and the Ugandan coffee sector. So this is a very important and relevant and interesting topic, as well, as Uganda is one of the major coffee exporters to the EU and has a large and diverse coffee farming community. And to help us understand how the EUDR affects the Ugandan coffee sector and what the challenges and opportunities for the compliance are, we have invited Jennifer, a sustainability expert and consultant, to share her insights. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. I was asked to take part today in the discussion to bring a perspective of feasibility of the implementation of the EUDR and its potential impacts in producing countries. So a very quick word about myself to start with. I worked in international development for 13 years before I decided to reorient my career towards sustainability. And I did a second master's in sustainability at UCL last year. And During my studies, I did my research on the potential impacts of the EUDR on the coffee sector in Uganda. And I conducted nearly 70 interviews with actors at every level along the coffee supply chain, from producers to government representatives in the country and abroad, as well as representatives of the EU NGOs and the EU Parliament in Brussels. So I was interested in, and I think probably a lot of you are as well, interested in the effectiveness of international sustainability standards and their ability to have an impact on elements of sustainability on the ground. As part of the process of drafting the EUDR, the European Commission, through the DG Environment, conducted and published an impact assessment on the demand side measures to address deforestation, but there wasn't anything public in the public domain on an impact assessment on the supply side. I've learned afterwards that the European Commission did commission a number of impact assessments on the supply side, but they were never made public. So as part of my results, I came across many challenges to the implementation of the EUDR in the country, but the greatest challenges that I came across were the cost of compliance technology. And I saw that one of the questions in the chat earlier was, who is meant to pay for the geolocation and the mapping and the polygon technology? So there is a lack of funding commitment from outside the coffee industry at the moment, although some would say that the coffee industry itself should be responsible for paying those costs. I'll come back a little bit later on who ends up paying it in Uganda. The second most important challenge was the timeframe for compliance, which appeared to be too short, by the 30th of December 2024, and the fact that it's not an incremental approach to compliance. And the third challenge is the lack of clear definitions used in the regulation and clear information on the due diligence and enforcement processes, for example. So as some of you might know, the EC has not published yet an implementation act. And at the time of my research, it was not clear whether the EC was ever going to publish this act. So maybe some of you know more about this now. So I conducted a readiness assessment to assess whether the industry in Uganda would be ready to comply with the regulation within the existing deadline. And my conclusions were that the coffee industry in Uganda is not likely to be able to show compliance with the regulation by the implementation deadline. So I don't want to be more anxiety inducing. I know we're meant to talk of hope. But I'll explain why not. So in terms of the no deforestation requirement, which requires the traceability of crops. So I think the local contacts participate, is one of the reasons why I think the sector will not be ready in Uganda. There's roughly 1.8 million smallholder farmers in Uganda. Through my research, I found out that less than 10% of the coffee is currently traceable in Uganda, and that many coffee producers are even reluctant at having their farms mapped out for a number of reasons. It might be due to land property issues and worry that this might lead to increased taxes. They're not keen to share their information with the government and private entities. The conventional supply chain in Uganda, which is run by what they refer to as middlemen, who are not even registered in a system. So this represents 90% of the coffee supply chain in Uganda, and they're not equipped to collect the information and the data that's necessary for the EUDR at the moment. In terms of the legality requirement, I thought it was very telling that no one seemed to be aware of that requirement or to talk about that requirement. So I simply deducted that if nothing had been put in place yet, it was unclear, if not unlikely, that the industry would be ready by the deadline. Going back to the third main challenge I identified earlier, which was the lack of information and clear definition. In practice, I found out that this also meant that a number of larger and smaller private sector actors were delaying starting their preparedness activities because of that. And I think a lot of you are from the private sector, so I'm sure you'll understand that there's a reticence to making investments without knowing whether these investments will be in compliance with the regulation if we're lacking information on implementation. Finally, I've also observed a lack of faith in the enforcement capacities and mechanisms of EU states who are altogether responsible for the enforcement of the regulation. And this view was based on the previous experience that people have had with the EU timber regulation. And so that meant that the private sector was, not as urgently keen on preparing. So how the coffee sector in Uganda is likely to be impacted by the regulation? My findings found that there'll probably be the sector would structurally be impacted in two main ways. First of all, there'll probably be further consolidation at the level of international traders. So it's expected that some traders who have perhaps invested less than others in the country and who are lagging behind in terms of traceability system in the country might just stop sourcing from countries that are at high risk of deforestation, as been benchmarked by the EC, such as Uganda. And also it's expected that a number of smaller local traders might disappear as they won't be in a position to provide proof of compliance with the regulation. And is the regulation likely to achieve the objectives that it gave itself was also something I was interested in looking at. So from an environmental point of view, the EU is interested in having a shift I'm just going to change my notes, sorry. So first of all, the promotion of deforestation-free supply chain is one of the environmental goals. So my findings show that the impact of coffee growing in Uganda is insignificant when it comes to deforestation. So most of the farmers practice intercropping. And so coffee is probably not contributing to deforestation significantly. In terms of the second environmental goal, so a shift in sourcing practices away from countries at high risk of deforestation. So I believe that it is likely that less Ugandan coffee will be sold in the EU market, which currently represents about 70% of the exports from Uganda. As I mentioned earlier, the industry is unlikely to be able to comply with the regulation by the deadline, also because the transaction cost of doing business in Uganda will increase, and it will probably increase more in Uganda than in other countries where there are fewer larger farms or where farms are already mapped out, like in Costa Rica, for example. And this, I believe, will lead to a redirection of exports from Uganda to other countries that have less stringent requirements for sustainability. From an economic point of view, and coming back to the question that was asked in the chat, from my research, I believe that ultimately the producers, the farmers themselves are likely to pay the additional cost incurred by the regulation of the compliance system. At the moment, international traders are mostly paying the cost, not the retailers. And it's thought that in the long term, in order to recuperate their costs, the price paid to farmer might slowly in the long term reduce in order for them to recuperate their costs. And also, if more coffee is sold to markets with less stringent sustainability requirements, this means that the price that farmers will get for their coffee is likely to be reduced, because those markets usually pay less for their coffee. I wasn't able to look from the social point of view, because as I said earlier, it's an aspect of the regulation I think that is very much overlooked, and people had not thought about this requirement yet. But I think it's something to look into in the future. And now what this means for the trading industry, well, I'll leave you to discuss that throughout the rest of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We had a question, if you could share your research paper on
Okay,
this.
yes. It's I will have a summary finding available soon, and so maybe I can share it with you, and then we can
Thank you
share
so
it more
much.
broadly.
Thank you. And Arif, I see you have your hand raised. Please go
Yes,
ahead.
I decided to write in the chat, but now I think I should answer it. We have questions from Mr. Richard, from Richard and Timon regarding the smallholders farms and regarding the African washing stations that produces multiple lots of coffee each season. And there is a really big problem with tagging all the geolocations, but logically, yes, we can't do here anything, because each batch should include geotags of the land plots where the coffee was produced, and they most probably you need to think of how to divide farmers into two categories. So the first one, which 100% do not work on the lands where there is the risk of deforestation, and the rest of them. And after that, you can, for example, work with the rest farms to provide some evidence that their business is not connected with the deforestation. And then you should maybe just physically separate this process. I see only this solution, eliminating the risks of mixing at the washing station. I'm not sure if I understand this very well, the process of washing, but the physical mixing, physical separation is the only option that can help here. And then you will supply to European Union only from the first category, and providing all information on all geolocation involved in the process. And for your customer, it will be enough. It may be enough information, enough level of proof, enough proof of evidence, if you show that you have separated physically these two flows and there is no risk of mixing. So it's a problem, an issue that you have to elaborate together with your customers. So you should involve your customers, because as I told, your customers are responsible and they falling under the EUDR, not you. So you have only corporate obligations. So they can buy your coffee. They may not buy your coffee. But if you are going to continue business in European Union, you should talk. You should talk to your customers, and we cannot do anything here else. So thanks, and sorry for interruption. I think that's important.
No, thank you so much, Arif, for answering this important question. And thank you so much, Jennifer, once again, for your insightful and very engaging presentation on the EUDR and the Ugandan coffee sector. Now let's move on to our next topic, which is the coffee associations and their role. And this is a very important topic, as the associations are the representative body of the coffee industry and have a vital role in promoting and protecting the interests of the members and the wider coffee sector. And we have invited Paul, the executive director of the British Coffee Association, to share his views and expertise. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm actually just going to start back on that last point, I think, because and pick up the number of questions that have come in, because it is one of the most difficult areas, I think, for coffee. simply because of the numbers involved. And I suspect that separation at washing stations is going to be almost impossible, if not impossible, just because of the numbers involved. And I think it raises one of the issues that coffee has specifically versus some of the other commodities that are caught by this. Yeah, I can take a 60,000 ton vessel to Mato Grosso in Brazil and have it loaded with soya that's the produce of one farmer. And I know that because I'm aware of the sort of the farmers of that size. You cannot do that in coffee. I think we talk about 12.5 million coffee producers, the vast majority of whom are smallholders. So the vast majority would be probably under the 4 hectares, which is the difference between a single geolocation and the need to provide sort of polygons. So I think it's not that it can't be done. I think the big question is, can it be done within the time scale that the regulation is requiring? And I think that is the big difficulty. And I suspect for some countries it can, for others it is very unlikely. And that leads to a number of concerns that I think are shared across everybody within the industry about what are the implications for those countries that cannot meet it within the time scale, because companies will have to decide what they do in terms of their purchasing from those countries. And I think it's also important, and it's starting to take me back, I guess, to what I was originally going to talk about, is, although we talk about EUDR and this coming from the EU, this is not operating in a vacuum. We are in the UK looking at very similar legislation. Switzerland is looking at similar legislation. The US has expressed its interest in what the EU is doing, and there are a number of bills that are sitting within the sort of the system there. Whether they move forward next year is I guess largely dependent on the elections there. But you look at Japan, you look at China, there are a number of countries that are very concerned about deforestation and looking to move forward. So this is really where associations start to come in. So we talk about access to regulators there in that first point, and it is about getting to the Commission. It is about sharing these concerns with the Commission. And I think when you read the regulation, it's also important to read the preamble. I think one or two people have talked about that, and the preamble, can give some very useful hints as to what the intention is of the Commission. And I think from their point of view, they recognise that there are challenges here, and they recognise that their sort of 100% compliance does raise some issues. I think the question that they have still, and they can't find an answer, is how do we provide guidance that overcomes that gives people the sort of the clarity to sort of move forward. And that's one of the things that I think from associations we can sort of help with. And we are part of the European Coffee Federation, and I sit on the exec there, and ECF has been doing a lot of work with organisations to try and help provide some clarity, including with, for example, the EU Space Agency, to look at how do we have a system that gives clarity on geolocation, perhaps removes the need to have on the ground verification in the majority of cases, because that's a very heavy workload for somebody to take on, and a heavy cost as well. But also, how do we get clarity that what systems are being put in place by businesses are meeting the requirements of a regulation that at the moment still has quite a number of gaps in it in terms of our understanding. And I think just coming back to the point of IT, and IT, it is going to play a major role. But I think we should also try and look, if possible, and it may be quite difficult to do this at the moment, what other opportunities come out of this? Are we able to build an IT system that not only delivers on the requirements for this legislation, but also gives us more opportunity to work with producers and use that data system to provide information back to farmers? So we need to look at this both in the short term and in the long term. So I think that's part of what associations are trying to do, and in our sort of links with other organisations such as the ICO, again with coffee associations around the world, we're engaged in conversations with a number of these on a fairly informal basis. So some of the countries I've already talked about from the consuming side, but also producing organisations. And we're also doing that with some of the origin countries, producing countries through their embassies, through engagement with the High Commissions, both their High Commissions here, but also the UK High Commissions in some of those countries. And at the same time, looking at from our members' point of view, we obviously have a dedicated section on our website which is providing a lot of information. So not only the regulations itself, but also the Q&As. The Commission have produced their Q&A. They're due to update that very soon. We've produced, I think, now 3 versions of our own Q&A, which I would like to argue is perhaps a little bit more in words of one syllable, and therefore maybe slightly easier to sort of understand some of the sort of points. So it's all part of trying to give companies this information, as well as providing updates on a weekly basis, but also, and this is, I think, is quite important from a trade association point of view more generally, is providing them with a route through which they can ask then their own specific sort of questions on a one-to-one basis and get some sort of understanding, either from us or allowing us to then go and talk to somebody who can provide that information. And then we have also been trying to bring to not only members' attentions, but to others. Most of our webinars are sort of open, as this one is to anybody, to bring to the attention of businesses those third-party companies who can provide solutions or potential solutions to this. So they may be in the area of IT, they may be in terms of sort of satellite mapping. And I think, you know, again, trying to have IT systems that link this particular issue with other potential issues, because we are talking more broadly about human rights, we're talking about the rights of Indigenous people, we're talking about wider sustainability, corporate due diligence. There are some very common sort of themes that run through all of this, and data systems hopefully will pick those up and run with them. But then we're also talking across the sort of the wider chain, and I think, you know, we have been talking to, for example, UK retailers recently, and how do we work together as a whole chain? Because I think at the moment a lot of companies are having to take their own approach to delivering this, because there is an absence of anything else, and you know, some companies, and particularly bigger companies, have brands that are very important to them. So there are a lot of different approaches being taken at the moment. I think over time we look at how those different systems can be brought closer together, whether that's through sort of recognizing each one or another, but at least having some sort of more common approaches. And I think that comes in time, but again, associations are part and parcel of working behind that scene. And I guess also just sort of very finally, and then we can sort of look at some other questions. Coming back to this point of, you know, we also need to be aware of what's happening in these other regulatory environments, and I've talked about Switzerland, I've talked about the UK and the US, and trying to ensure that whatever these other legislation bodies do is not going to present companies with the need to run multiple different systems. So we need to have a degree of commonality. We don't need to have things running exactly the same. The UK, for example, is less concerned about geolocation in its proposals and more about a sort of a wider risk assessment. But it's ensuring those systems can run from a complementary basis within businesses, and making sure that we don't have to have, you know, multiple ways of doing things, because that simply adds to the cost without actually delivering much more in terms of meeting the requirements of the regulation. So I think I will stop there, and we can perhaps then move on to some of the other questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. You just shed light on so many important points, and answered, I'm sure, so many questions that the audience has. Thank you so much. It was very informative and insightful. Now, let's move on to our next topic, which is the participation in multi-stakeholder platforms. This is a very relevant, once again, an important topic, as it involves the collaboration and coordination of different actors to ensure consistent and effective implementation and enforcement of the EUDR. Arif, over to you.
Yes, thanks again. And The main idea of participation in the multi-stakeholders platform is to bring your voice at the table. So there are different ways of how can we participate here, and different reasons why we should do this. But honestly speaking, for us, and for coffee companies, it is important to share their opinion, to to test the system, because we know that the testing of their information system is going to start in November, and also to receive the new information, but all the same information you can receive just being a part of the association. Also, I know that being a part of the association, which is the member of a multi-stakeholders platform, you can also have all the necessary benefits. So here the idea and the recommendation is to communicate to your association and to ask them if they are participating in the multi-stakeholders platform. And if you are building the IT system, it's also good to ask your association to introduce you to the European Commission, and so you can be the part of these 100 companies who is making this testing, and who will be the first who will try the system. So maybe Malcolm also can add some colors to this question. Malcolm, what's about your company and how you going to participate here?
Yeah, so there are various multi-stakeholder platforms. The one that I think has direct relevance for this law is the multi-stakeholder platform on forests, and individual businesses in Europe are not allowed to become a member of that multi-stakeholder platform, but they can have a participation or a voice via other multi-stakeholder groups, such as the European Coffee Federation, which has applied for and hopefully shortly will receive confirmation of participation in this multi-stakeholder platform. So for I see a big benefit in working together with both national associations, such as British Coffee Association and the others all across Europe, as well as the European Coffee Federation, and participating in those groups and being members of those groups in order to get insight into the workings of what's happening in this interesting time as the regulation is interpreted, and all of these questions that everyone has are worked through, and things like FAQs are issued, and businesses then get a little drip feed of information as to learning a little bit more every month or so. So yeah, I see great value in participating in those areas, and I have to say that I've seen some great work from the national coffee associations, not just the BCA, but also Dutch Tea and Coffee, for example, on helping their members understand what it's possible to know at each time. Yeah, of course, getting involved specifically in the testing, I think will be, if it's possible for a company to do that, I think, and that can only be helpful in being ready for putting this into implementation at the very end of next year.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, Sharif and Malcolm. Now, before we move on to the next topic, we would like to ask your audience a question. How do you see your due diligence system? Please let us know by clicking on the poll button below. And Arif, please, thank you.
Yes, but not the diligence system, but multi-stakeholders platform. The topic is.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yes. Are you participating now? Are you going to participate
in the multi-stakeholder platform?
Yes, exactly. Yes, as soon as we receive the answers, we can go. I think we can move forward because we don't have this, so much time available.
And we'll be sending the poll result statistics over to everyone's email. So
Yes, and
yielded that
also the
as well.
answers for all your questions in the chat, because there are a lot of interesting questions. We will forward it after the discussion.
All right, I guess we can move on to the last topic of our panel discussion, actually, which is the consumer engagement and the future of EUDR implementation. This is a very interesting topic. It involves potential opportunities and risks of having better traceability and visibility. Malcolm, the floor is yours.
Yeah, and I think Paul already mentioned some of the things here that I think there's so much to get our heads around, and each player in the chain, from the farmer all the way through to the retailers, maybe dealing with some different challenges, but everyone has these challenges and some shared as well. But if we do think about a future scenario where there is the law is in place, that the market is effectively operating according to this regulation, and once that is in a sort of a steady state, if we like, and if we imagine into that future, then we're now in a situation where every product on a level playing field that is supplied into the EU market has a degree of data associated with it that it didn't have in the past. And I think there have been numerous attempts over time by various companies to talk about what they do in the supply chain, what their supply chain looks like, to connect and tell the stories of the coffee farmers to ultimately to consumers, the drinkers of the coffee. And once EUDR is in place, I think it's another really important element that can connect the drinking world with the growing world, which should, in the longer term, actually be beneficial for creating, I think, greater fairness in the overall supply chain through that traceability and transparency. I think we've highlighted and well aware that it's probably not going to be a smooth road to get there, but there is some optimism at the end. So that if we're able to help, particularly the smallholder farmers, continue to supply to Europe, there's a brighter future at the end with stronger engagement, stronger connection between the source of the coffee and the consumers. There is a flip side to that, which is that some information in the coffee supply chain is a closely guarded secret. Of course, there are such things as secret blends, recipes, other elements like this. Some people have some concerns about that element. I think that probably will be relatively simple to manage, but it's fair to say that everything that companies do today to obscure supply chains will be harder to do in the future, and there's would be risk management consequences or intellectual property consequences from some of that. So working in a company, you just need to be aware of what that might mean, and set yourselves up for a future where transparency is the normal, and to take best advantage of that to engage customers and consumers alike.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. I am sure the audience enjoyed.
Angelica, maybe any others of our speakers have their opinions on the previous questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
If yes, please feel free to comment, Paul or maybe Jennifer. If not, I
think as Malcolm said, indeed, I sort of tried to reference where I think we do have sort of opportunities coming from better traceability, looking at it in the round, although I accept it is quite difficult at the moment. Just very quickly, the other thing I will say, which I hope isn't too controversial, but looking in the chat at some of the issues about how difficult it is to sort of get geotag, etc., etc. I mean, we are talking about a location point. And I would say we do have to be very careful here, because we do have some issues around simply the volume of producers, the number of producers, the fact that the majority are small. in getting this information in the timescale. But at the end of the day, if producers are delivering to washing stations or wherever, there is already a data transfer and they are getting paid for that produce. So there is already a transfer of information between the parties in the chain. What we're looking at is how do we add extra sort of parts to that in its sort of simplest form at the producer level. So I think we do have to be slightly careful about how much we sort of kick back on this, because, you know, data is already moving, and I think, you know, we need to perhaps sort of save some of our fire for some of the more challenging areas, which is around, can we deliver all of this within the timescale? Should we be asking the Commission for, you know, a degree of sort of an implementation period to sort of ensure that we get all the ducks in a row? Because I think, as Jennifer pointed out in her Uganda work, there are parts of the chain that I think are still quite blindsided by what is expected of them, and we still have to get to all of those people.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul. Does anyone else want to add something to that? All right. I guess we can move to the Q&A session that we have come close to the end of our webinar. This is your chance to ask your questions that you may have about the EUDR and its complications for your business and the environment. We have our panelists and speakers with us who are ready to answer your questions and share their views. You can just once again type your questions in the chat box, or you can raise a hand and we'll unmute your mic and turn on your camera so you can speak directly to the other participants and the speakers. So please do that. We're looking forward to getting your questions now. Or actually, if we have missed any of the questions in the chat, if you could post them again, if you didn't receive any answer from us before.
In any case, we will go across all the questions in the chat and add them to the Q&A paper, and we will forward the Q&A paper, and also the recording of this webinar will be available, so you can answer all the questions later. Any questions you would like, we will forward it to the expert and answer it.
Yeah, I have a question maybe for Jennifer and other speakers, because there is a common sentiment in the chat that it's very hard for small farmers who are coming like with one sack of beans to comply, basically provide the required data. So I was wondering, as part of your research, have you come across any corporate programs that empower supply chain that work well? Because I would imagine that would require a lot of education, capacity building, building trust, culture change, etc., to make it work on the ground. So do you have any examples of best practice, maybe from the coffee sector or other sectors?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, the examples that I saw that worked best was the larger, well, two different ones. So the larger traders, who had about 10% of their supply chain as a kind of direct supply, vertically integrated with farmers coming to the washing station, and then they were mapping all the farmers in this part of the supply chain. But again, that was only about 10% of that. And what they're planning to do in the future is look at the conventional side supply chain and try to see if they can limit the number of transactions in that part of the supply chain and formalize the transactions there as well. So in Uganda, we're talking about all the middlemen who, there might be 10 before it gets to the trader. So trying to reduce the number of middlemen and formalize the transaction, and working with them, doing some capacity building to give them the tools and skills to be able to collect the information and pass it on. There was also the smaller traders, more in the specialty coffee who had invested, because they're getting more for their product, they had some funding that they'd invested into traceability, and who were already 100% with traceable coffee. So obviously they reach the number of farmers they reach was less, but it's easier to manage.
Also, there is an interesting question about the role of certification schemes like Rainforest Alliance. So I guess the answer is that if you're part of it, it doesn't automatically make it you compliant, but it makes you better prepared, because ideally you would have better oversight of your supply chain and some safeguards within your organization to be certified. But I was wondering, maybe a question for Paul. Are you engaging different voluntary schemes, and what kind of role do you think they would play in spreading awareness, in preparing people on the ground, etc., and helping organizations who are already part of the certification schemes, to better prepare for EUDR?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we are talking to some of them, and I think one or two are in the middle of developing sort of changes to their system, which will, I think, not deliver automatic sort of delivery of everything of EUDR, but will perhaps give them as a scheme more of an opportunity to be of greater value, if I can put it like that, in terms of what they can deliver for EUDR. So, they can be an important component of delivering, particularly where you might be required to look at further risk mitigation. So certification can play a role in that because of the work that they've already done. So there are opportunities, and we are again sort of talking to them about, well, how do we come together and have a sort of a more sort of formal exchange rather than sort of having lots of sort of bilateral. So I think one or two are still uncertain as to the role that they need to play and how central EUDR is to, some of them have very different sort of aims and objectives, and how central EUDR is to that, to delivering their sort of core objectives. So conversations are sort of ongoing. And just very quickly, I pick up one question that I'm not sure we have answered from earlier on, which reflected on SMEs and non-SMEs. And I think the point for SMEs is, they are required to provide some information, but it's more about who they bought from, who they sort of sell to, and passing on that sort of information rather than having to go and provide their own due diligence. Having said that, it is certainly possible that as the regulation moves forward and as we get into the review periods, 2 years, 5 years, etc., that there may be more requirements coming on SMEs, because we have certainly seen that in the past. SMEs are usually kept out of regulation at the start because of the cost implications, but once systems are there, potentially it becomes cheaper to bring SMEs in and place greater requirements on them. So the fact that there is a difference at the moment, I think we shouldn't believe that difference will continue in perpetuity.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, you're correct that SMEs, it's supposed to be simple for them because they can rely on due diligence done by someone else. But also, I'm imagining a situation that there could be an SME that wants to directly buy from a farm they know, and then the legislation is quite prohibitive for such cases because you still need to be a big organization in order to do all the checks. And as an SME, it would be quite hard, to keep all the documentation and provide issue DSS. So yeah, it's meant to help them, but it will discourage certain types of business models that cut the middleman.
Howie, I guess if Igor could please help me unmute Howie's mic and turn on the camera so that they can ask their question, please.
Yeah, I think we have one question from Howie.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. I don't know how to turn my camera on. Oh, there we go. Hi. Yeah, like listening to all of this, it feels, and there's this overwhelming sense that there's just so much to do and there's nowhere near enough time. Does any of you guys feel that? Like I'm just trying to think, like in 1 year, I feel like we're basically going to have to, there's going to be some problems. Like no one's going to be fully going with all these regulations by 2024. And do you think that they're going to be really strict on this, or do you think they'll have to go back like the EU and be a bit more lenient? Yeah, it just feels a bit like the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I mean, yes, Howie, I feel exactly like that as well. So what we see from our side is, and I don't know which sort of which sector are you in? Are you a coffee roaster or a trader or?
We're a roastery, yeah.
Roastery, yeah. So we operate in a number of different countries, and I think what's critical when it comes to will people go easy in the first sort of months or years of this? It's a little bit in the wind because each member state's competent authority is responsible for implementation. So a Belgian competent authority could take a different tack on it compared to an Italian one. So with the countries where we have most of our business, we're within the national coffee associations, and we do see some variety. So the variety that we see today, which is on questions like, have they assigned a responsible ministry? Kind of step one, right? You know, there'll be another 200 questions coming. So I think that there will be different approaches from different places. So for example, the German authority seems to be much more strict in its current setup, but others are less so, and they are collaborating together to try and bring some conformity across. But keep our eyes peeled. If you're a member of a national association, I think that's really, really important for the ones you operate in. And yeah, I feel exactly the same. It can't all be working perfectly on day one, but who wants to take the risk that that you get on the wrong side of it? So we try our best.
Got to try our best.
Very quickly. Very quickly, I think the two elements that won't change is the legislation will not be reopened, that is certain. But I think the Commission are very keen to see a consistent approach across the member states, and that leads to Malcolm's point that at the moment we're perhaps nowhere near that. I think the other element of pressure that comes is perhaps still from origin countries who, you know, have to have a conversation with the Commission about the risk assessment applied to their country. So there are still a number of bits of this that have to be gone through, and that it won't delay the legislation, but it might provide a period of easement, and I'll probably put it no stronger than that. But I think the caution is none of us can rely on that happening at this stage, so we have to proceed as if it is coming in. And for some countries, it's not December 2024. In reality, it's happening much sooner than that because of the harvest period, etc. So we need to be alive to that as well.
Thank you so much. I guess it's time right now for us to wrap up. If you guys have any other questions, please post them here, or you could always email me or email Arif, and we'll make sure we answer all of the questions. And thank you very much for your attention and participation in this webinar, both our expert speakers and audience. This is, by the way, not the end of our journey. This, like I mentioned, is the first of the series of webinars that we are organizing to help you prepare and comply with the EUDR. We will have our next webinar in the beginning of December, and we'll also have another Q&A session with the European Commission to clarify any doubts or questions that you may have. We also invite you to join us in creating the EUDR guide, which is a comprehensive and practical resource that we are now creating, which will include the best practices and optimal approaches for developing and implementing due diligence systems. And your insight and feedback are highly baluable for us and for the industry, for your peers, and everyone in general who are related who are in the coffee sector. And if you need any support or assistance complying with the EUDR, you can always contact us via our hotline or our emails. And we have experts who are well versed in the EUDR's requirements and can help you with any compliance related questions and challenges. And you can also find Arif's email address below, and feel free to reach out to him at any time. And finally, we encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, where we post regular updates and information on the EUDR and other related topics. And yeah, thank you so very much for being here today. It was a great pleasure to have you with us. We hope to see you again on our next webinar, and have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much.